An Edmonton woman has been found guilty of criminal negligence causing death after her two large Cane Corso dogs killed an 11-year-old boy at her home in April of 2024. The trial heard the dogs had a history of aggressive behavior before the violent attack. Rishi Gill joins us from Edmonton. Rishi, thank you for being on the program. What did the judge point to in finding the dog's owner criminally responsible?
Yes, so throughout the trial, the prosecution brought forth a number of witnesses who testified about the dog's history of aggression and their experiences. Now, this included a woman who was at McDonald's backyard when she wasn't home. She was attacked by the pair of Cane Corsos, and she suffered a punctured lung, broken ribs, among other injuries. Now, a former basement tenant also testified about an attack on himself, and he received multiple stitches. That same basement tenant said that his cat was killed, as well as a man whose 10-pound Pomeranian was killed by the Cane Corsos. Justice Eric Macklin said McDonald was well aware of the aggressive nature of the dogs. Macklin said that the Crown was successfully able to prove the three essential elements for Crystal McDonald's charge. These include her failure to show reasonable steps to ensure Cash was safe, her conduct showed a reckless disregard for Cash's safety, and finally, her conduct ultimately resulted in the boy's death. Now, following the verdict, defense attorney Evan McIntyre said that they're disappointed with the decision.
Miss McDonald, who loved that boy like a nephew, was put in a very difficult position when his father showed up with him and took steps that, to her, she reasonably believed would protect the child in the week that he was staying there. And so we're disappointed it wasn't seen that way by the court, but we don't believe that Cash's death was Miss McDonald's responsibility.
Hey, Jasmine, what comes next in this case?
Well, McIntyre said that they're considering different options to prepare for the sentencing, and one of these options may be filing an appeal. And Crown prosecutors Anders Quist told McDonald that she could have done more to ensure Cash was safe.
Ms. McDonald should have put the dogs down, boarded them somewhere else, made sure that Cash wasn't boarding with her, or taken other physical steps in the house.
But right now, defense and Crown attorneys are going to decide sentencing submissions and recommendations, and McDonald is expected to be sentenced in September.
Okay, Jasmine, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, to talk more about this guilty verdict and what it means more broadly, I've got criminal defense lawyer Rishi Gill, who's in Vancouver, joining us. Rishi, as I'm asking you this question, I want to first, for the viewers, put up a picture here of the dog that we're talking about here. It's Cane Corso, very large dog, and the picture you're looking at, this is one of the actual dogs that was involved in this, and they were euthanized after the attack and the fatal attack happened. But Rishi, so that's the Cane Corso. What do you make of the fact that there is actually a guilty verdict in this case? How unusual is that?
Well, I think it's unusual to have cases like this where a person is killed. So that's on an upside. It doesn't happen every day. And I think the fact that it's news demonstrates the fact that how rare it is. But the verdict itself is not surprising. I'm not blaming defense or somebody who didn't do their job properly. It's when you look at the background facts where a liability under criminal negligence is not ordinary negligence, where you break a window or something happens that was just not, the repercussions weren't so grave and the conduct was not up at that high standard of criminal liability. Here it has to be what's called a marked and substantial departure from norms based on reasonable foreseeability. The background to this case is incredible. When you look at all the different things that occurred, like the owner herself has bitten, there was animals that had been injured before. It was very clear that there was a problem here. The fact that the dogs weren't neutered by that time, and there was missed appointments for being neutered there as well. So there's so much in the background that makes the resulting verdict not necessarily surprising. Now, with that said, I wasn't following every day of the case, and I wasn't privy to the inside arguments that were done, but it's almost a textbook case of what not to do in these types of situations.
But Rishi, have there been many criminal convictions of actual dog owners in a case? And of course, you're right, it is unusual that we have a death here, but news of a dog attack these come up in headlines semi-regularly, and focus goes in on the dog owner, but I've never seen it go to this length or to the end of a court and a guilty verdict.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, it's rare in and of itself. It's not like this happens every other day. There was a case in Quebec where a 7-year-old had been killed by a pit bull. There was a decision in Ontario where there was a guilty plea. In that case, a 9-year-old had been severely injured by bulldog types. So where it's somebody who has control of the dog and should have reasonably foreseen that, it's going to happen. And it's like you're just not doing the job expected of you as a dog owner. And it's resulting in something that is, I suppose what you'd say is it's just not a surprise. Like this, I don't think anybody is particularly surprised when you look at all the facts that this was a possibility. And I think that's the issue.
And then what is the message? What's the takeaway for dog owners, particularly dog owners of some of the breeds that you have mentioned? And in this case, we're talking about a cane corso, but in the there's also issues that arise around pit bulls, for instance.
I think that it's an interesting question because, look, on the one hand, it's such a dramatic and such a gruesome, tragic case. And a young boy who lost his life in a violent fashion. His father had to attend upon and discover all this. So it's very dramatic. At the same time, and it's rare, and I should say that, but at the same time, it's sort of like saying, what's the lesson, to make an analogy? Like if you had facts where it was somebody had 10 beers and then was very drunk and then drove a high-powered Ferrari in a residential neighborhood and killed somebody, what's the lesson there? Well, the lesson is I'm not trying to say that it's a bad question whatsoever, but the lesson is sort of obvious. Don't do this. Like basically, if you have dogs that have a predisposition to potentially being violent, and here, the history was so clear. Like that's the issue. It's not like this just came out of nowhere. The violence in the background already was bad. And then you have a young boy who's a stranger to all these dogs, who's left by himself with the dogs. I think this is so far across the line from just on the observable facts that you wonder why it had to go that way. But I think all dog owners should always be aware of their dogs. And I think I'm a dog owner, and I have a Labrador and a Golden Retriever. They don't actually go bite people, but we always have to be mindful of our neighbors and the community. So I think it's just be aware, and especially if you have a history of this type of behavior.
Do you have any thoughts on what the sentence for this might be, assuming that there isn't an appeal and we don't know yet?
Yeah, I mean, she has to get sentenced, regardless of whether there's an appeal or not. You have to get sentenced first before you can do the appeal. I would suspect, because the boy lost his life and because of the findings of the judge, which were very negative towards the accused, there was credibility issues. And I think that the judge basically found that she was trying to pass the blame, and it wasn't her fault, and it was somebody else that could have done something. That those might be arguments to a certain extent, but the issue really is you're the owner, they were your dogs, you knew the boy was there, and more should have been done. And I don't think it's going to be a light sentence. I can't predict what it would be. I would certainly foresee jail time in this situation. But they're relatively rare, and I think it's certainly, I would not be surprised if there's a substantial jail sentence involved. But we have to appreciate that Canada is much different from the States. In the States, you would probably go to jail for 30 years. That's what happens down there. And I think that's inappropriate. Here, she would be looking at, in Canada, would be considered to be a stiff sentence, and that would be most likely in the single digits. But that's the seriousness of the case.
Rishi Gill is a criminal defense lawyer in Vancouver. Rishi, thank you.
Thank you.